Paranormies, it's Jenna and you're on the light side of the paranormal. So this video is long overdue. This is a recap of the 4th episode in the Hellier docuseries. Now I know these videos are not our most popular videos, but I still like to make them because I know that there's a few of you out there that really enjoy watching these recaps, and I enjoy doing them. This is my favorite docuseries. This is one of my favorite paranormal shows out there, and so I love to share that with you guys. It brings me a lot of joy and excitement, and so this is number 4. The team calls this episode Slivers of the Future. If you haven't watched any of the previous videos and what I'm saying right now makes no sense to you, please click here and start on number 1 and then make your way back here to number 4 and join us on this video. And quickly before we get started, if spooky and paranormal stuff is your jam, become a part of our Paranormy fam and click subscribe. So let's get right into it. Episode 4 opens up with the team talking about synchronicities as they hang up with Tyler Strand. And Greg describes synchronicities and what they mean to him as meaning you're going in the right direction. You're moving in the right direction, little signs and symbols that things are progressing the way that they're supposed to in life. And I completely agree with that. That's exactly how I see synchronicities as well. Like, the right path that you're supposed to be on and the path you're actually on converge and you get that synchronicity, like this is exactly where you're supposed to be. Now there's a clip in this where Carl explains how somebody he knew in the past who had experiences with goblin-like creatures as well, not in Hellier, explained that he thought of the synchronicities as a possible manifestation of the phenomena. Almost like this is how these creatures can communicate, or this is a way of them communicating, is by bringing synchronicities into your life, which is a really interesting way to look at it, and it kind of opens up this whole door of, you know, things you never even thought of before when you're experiencing a synchronicity. So the next part in this episode, I actually talked about in number 3, thinking it was in episode 3, but it's actually in episode 4, where the team calls the guy who had seen the footprints, but they turned out to be a little bit more bird-like and not exactly what they were looking for. It's nighttime and I have my window open, and I don't know if you guys heard that at all. It's like screeching outside. Not fun when you're talking about goblins. I should tell you that when I start talking about these episodes and recaps and start rewatching in depth to take notes, weird stuff starts happening. So they had phoned this guy to ask him about the footprints. He described the footprints as being more bird-like and not really matching up with what they had expected. And so they started asking him about if he had ever experienced anything strange, and he's saying, no, not really. But I used to see UFOs a lot, and he kind of went into depth about that. And then he mentions how those sightings kind of ceased to exist 2 or 3 years ago. And Greg mentions that that's really interesting because that's around the time where all of these sightings seemed to stop in Hellier. So that coincided with what they had learned while doing their research in the town. So at this point they're getting really frustrated because all of these leads that they're getting, like the guy with the footprints and like everything else, is just like a lead and then nothing, a lead and then nothing. And it's starting to get really frustrating for them that they came here and they get really excited about these leads, but they lead them nowhere. And at this point they worry that they're really digging at Hellier and digging at these ideas when maybe it was a hoax, and they're digging so much that they're reaching. But they mentioned there's just too many synchronicities going on that's leading them in these directions that it can't be for no reason. So that night they're winding down for the day, and their cameraman Rashad just gets this idea and mentions to them, can't you track down emails with an IP address to figure out where these emails were coming from? And like in like a burst of energy, suddenly everybody is on it. Everyone's trying to figure out how you would get somebody's IP address from an email that they've sent, and now like Greg's on the computer and they're searching and they're trying to figure it out, and it's just this burst of energy and chaos as they start to think, oh my gosh, we might have an answer as to where these David Christie emails were being sent, or the Terry Wrist emails. And they had never thought of this idea before, so they're just right on it and into it. So they find a website where you can enter some information and it will tell you the supposed location of the IP address. And the first one that they do was from David Christie, I believe, and it actually shocks the entire team because it is not even from the United States. It is from Canada. And not only is it from Canada, it is from Ajax, Ontario, which is a mere few hours from where Dana and Greg were living at the time. So they're just spiraling at this moment, trying to think of if there's any local ghost hunters or Bigfoot hunters or paranormal people in the area that would have it out for them, that would want to hoax them this badly, and people that didn't like them, or, you know, somebody who would have put this much effort into really screwing with them at this point. And it just crushes them a little bit inside to think that this has all just been literally nothing. But nothing really fit. They couldn't figure it out. So then Connor mentions this guy Steve that he knows, and how he's a tech guy, and maybe he would know how to better search for these IP addresses. And so it's like 2 a.m. and they call him and they're desperate, and he's actually up and willing. You know, they mentioned like the Goblins, and he's like, sign me up, let's go. And so he gets right into it with them, trying to help them figure this out. So after digging a little bit, he lets them know that emails can actually bounce off other networks, creating a path. So it doesn't mean it was necessarily sent from Canada. He also mentions that you can use a VPN to hide your location, but somebody just reaching out for help, a regular civilian, probably wouldn't use a VPN. But they also mentioned that David Christie is supposed to be a doctor of some sort, or have a doctorate, so maybe he's got a PhD. Maybe he's sending these from a university, and a university might use a VPN. Essentially, the IP address wasn't helpful, and it was a bit of a dead end. So there's a shot in this episode which contains Greg explaining that David and Terry are not really on the radar anymore. They haven't heard from them in a few years. They're kind of just letting that go, not keeping their hopes up to hear back from them again. It's just almost like it was that they were meant to be in Hellier, and David and Terry were just doorways to get them there, not necessarily the actual focal point. So now the main focus is not really, you know, what was going on with David Christie. It's more of what's going on in Hellier and Pikeville and in the Appalachians and the cave system. So Joey, the guy that they met at, I believe, the gas station and the restaurant there, who gave them a few leads, mentions that there is an old cave, and it's actually an old train tunnel in the literal middle of nowhere. And it was only used for about 10 or 15 years, and then it was stopped being used because it was so unsafe. And they thought, this is the perfect place to go check out. It's actually connected to the caves in the hills and everything. So they think, all right, I believe it's their last night there, and like, let's finish this thing off by going here. Let's do it. So they go through this hike through the tall, tall grass. It's nighttime, it's dark. They're in the middle of nowhere. They're in a line. It's almost like going through cornfields. It's really freaky. They're all a little bit on edge because it just feels like they're walking forever, and you'd never know where you're going if this guy hadn't given them an actual GPS coordinates, and that's the only way they knew exactly where they were going. So they're walking through this tall grass, and they've got lanterns, and Dana is you know, in the middle, and she's kind of like, do you see anything? Are we there yet? You know, like they're just dying to get there and hoping that this doesn't lead them to nowhere. And finally they arrive at this huge, massive train tunnel. Like, it's expansive, it's so big. And the eeriest part about it is it's such a massive structure in the middle of the wilderness, which is eerie in itself. Anytime you see some type of large structure in the middle of nowhere, it's a little bit off-putting. It's eerie. And this is, you know, just like the cherry on top of the cake. They've made it to this cave system, and Greg describes it as being at least 30 feet tall. And they mention how, like, when they're inside of it, it doesn't even feel like you're inside of something because it's so big. You still feel like you're out in the open. So they get down into the entryway, and Greg mentions, oh my god, this goes on for like at least a mile, and it's just dark. And it was quite evident that kids don't hang out here. People don't come here to hang out. There's no garbage around. There's no graffiti on the walls. There's no scratches on the walls. This isn't a place that people come at all. He describes it as being evidently forgotten. And Greg mentions one of the most unsettling things about it is once they were inside, he was expecting to do the hello, 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 and listen, but there was no echo at all. It was like dead air. There was no echoing while they were speaking, and that was really unsettling to him. He describes it as feeling unnatural. So this video is a little bit shorter than the other ones because it ends on this last chunk of scenes and then we're done. And me telling this part to you is going to be a lot less mind-blowing than watching it yourselves, like it always is, but it is mind-blowing. So the last few scenes are them stepping down into the entryway of this tunnel, and there on the floor, in the middle of them, is a tin can. Now, anybody else might be like, so, tin can, who cares, it's garbage. But if you've seen the other episodes and you know what's going on with the team in Hellier, this was exactly what Connor described seeing in his head as a premonition while doing the Estes method when he was blindfolded and headphoned. And is that a thing? Headphone? He had his headphones on. So Connor was immediately shaken. He was visibly shook. He was unsettled. He was anxious and just, you know, this hadn't happened to him before, where he sees this vision in his head and then there it is the next day, I believe, or 2 days later. He was very like, why are we here? Like, why did this bring us here? Why did it show me this? Like, what is going on? And just so many questions and overwhelmed by what they were seeing. And this is the type of synchronicity that a lot of people might miss because you might think, oh, it's just garbage, kick it around. But it's sitting there for a reason. You saw this for a reason. You're here for a reason. A massive sign in something so simple. And a lot of times the average person just misses that. So they took that as a sign of confirmation that they were supposed to be here, that this is why they've been shown, or this is why Connor has been shown the tin can and its connection with this cave. Was it a synchronicity to try and tell them that they were on the right path? Or was it a premonition, like Connor saw this because it was about to come true? They don't know, but no matter what it is, they're here for a reason, and it's just like another brick in the pathway leading them to they don't know where. And that's where it ends, so you're left wondering, like, what happens next? They're in this tunnel, what happens next? And it's all very exciting, and I hope that you enjoyed this recap. It was much shorter than the other ones, but still just as fun. So if you like these videos, please don't forget to give it a like and comment down below. Leave me lots of comments if you enjoyed this, if you've watched the Hellier series yet, if you're watching episode by episode while I recap them, any of your thoughts or theories as to what's going to happen, or what you think is trying to be told to these people, anything. And if you're new here, don't forget to go over to our Instagram page and follow us there. You can follow Alice and myself on our personal pages as well. Everything will be linked in the description below. And like I always do, the Hellier docuseries and this episode will be linked down in the description as well. And that's it for me tonight, folks. So until next time, keep on creeping on. Bye.